Hi guys, this is Andrew, and in this tutorial I'll be covering 3ds Max and importing Illustrator curved Bezier lines and using them to loft and recreate, in particular, plaster sections. As a housekeeping tip though, for any computers used at UNISA with 3ds Max at the moment, you need to go to Customize, Unit Setup, and make sure you've got Display Unit Scale set to metric and millimeters, and then also click System Unit Setup, and making sure that that is set 1 unit is 1 millimeter. The university computers default to 1 unit equals 1 inch, which isn't appropriate. Now, in the previous tutorial I explained how to import Illustrator files into 3ds Max. In this case I'm going to import the sections to loft file that are used in the tutorial. The settings you need to use are merge and multiple objects, and that will import your curves, be it these or the ones that you will create later with your plaster. Now, loft in 3ds Max is made out of 2 parts. One is the line that the loft follows, and the other is the actual curve that follows that line. Today I showed an example using a straight line. In this tutorial I'm going to show an example with a curved line. The way to do that is when you create the line in 3ds Max, which you can find in the Create panel and Shapes, and then select Line, you can turn the drag type to Bezier instead of what it's default to in the Uni system to corner. So if you change that to Bezier, if you click and drag with that, it'll create a curved line instead of a straight one. And then you hit Escape to finish drawing the curve. As well, just another thing, the default view for the Uni computers is this particular view. You can change that by coming down to this bottom right button called Maximize Viewport Toggle, and if you select that, that'll open the top, front, left and perspective view. So, now that we have our line that we are going to loft along, we can then create the compound object loft using that line. To do that, you need to go to the Geometry section of the Create tab, and then in this drop down menu you need to move down to Compound Objects, select that, and we'll be using loft in this case. So if we select loft, it brings up the options. Now this has actually turned this into a loft. If you actually do something wrong, or don't select things properly after you've done this, then your line is still considered a loft. It just hasn't been given a section that follows that line. So in this case we need to select Get Shape, and I'm going to select my first shape in that line, which is this. And as you can see, it's following the path of that line. Now, to put in these extra outer curves sections onto that line, we need to change the path parameter at which they're going to be placed. So to do that, you can, if you see this little yellow cross, when I move this path parameter from 0 to 100, it's going to move to the certain percentage where that is on the line. So in this case, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll just do 10 curves for this example. So if I set that to 10% and select Get Shape, now when I select the second shape, it's going to place that in at the 10% point of the curve. And then if I select 20 and select Get Shape, I'm going to put that on 20%, and so forth. So I'm just going to finish these off. And 100% is obviously the final curve. I'm just going to ignore these last ones. I'm actually going to delete them just so that they are out of the way. Done. Now, as you can see, we've got an incredibly ugly blob which doesn't really convey what we're talking about, and that's probably because I haven't actually made this with a straight line. So what I'm going to do is show you guys how to edit the line after you've actually finished lofting the curve. So to do that, if you select your loft and you come up to this panel here, it also looks blue on a lot of other 3ds Max versions. If you select that, it'll give you the loft options, like as we had before when we were creating it. Now if we click this plus here, it's going to open the various elements of the loft, and then if we select path and then open the particular path file, which is the line, and select vertex, what that's going to do is allow us to select the vertices of that line and edit them. So in this case, I'm going to straighten mine out a bit. Now these are Bezier, so you can actually rotate them and they're going to affect the curvature of the line. And also, if you're actually creating a line that's anything other than 2 points, just also remember that this, if you, for example, we have the first point, the second point, and the third point, this actually is defining the 50% line on that line. If I delete that, you can see how that actually evens out now. Now in this case, this is a rather blobby representation of the plaster section that I used to create this. I am actually need you guys to make this into a patch instead of a mesh. So to do that, you need to select the loft, select modify again, select loft unless the loft options aren't already up, and then if you open the surface parameter menu, in the output section you need to move that from mesh to patch, and what that's going to do is turn that into a mathematical approximation of the surface instead of a polygonal approximation of the surface, which is great when we move into doing stuff with tessellation. So that is pretty much all that we covered today. Another thing that I may point out is when you are making your sections, your loft model, make a single loft for the exterior component, so these elements of the plaster sections, and then make a separate loft that deals with the inner ones, because eventually there may be some complications and it's much easier to deal with having a separate loft for each element. So in one case someone might actually have 2 different voids that sit within this exterior loft. It would be best to make each of them individually in 3ds Max instead of the whole thing together. And that's pretty much it. That's all we covered today. Hope you have fun with this, guys, and happy 3ds Maxing.